Right, okay, so I am not an RE teacher. I work for the local authority, and my job is to do with the green agenda. And the County Council here in Suffolk is meant to have a strategic priority of becoming the greenest county. You know, we all know about that, don't you? No, you don't. No. Is it a real political priority? No, I can say, because in my day job, I try to get the County Council to embed being greener in various aspects of what it does, and I struggle, and the other members of the team do as well, struggle to achieve, get any sort of movement at all. You may have come across the term greenwash at all, which is basically when the politicians and others say that they're going to do, and we all do really, because we're all part of the problem, say that we're going to do things and we don't really. We've got this environmental crisis with climate change, waste, resource scarcity, etc. But we're not really doing anything. Now, I sit on Sakre, I'm the Buddhist representative there, so start to talk to Mary about the inquiry-based learning approach that Mary was wanting to bring in. So I said, well, why don't we do something with RE teachers? And what I then went on to consider was our disconnect with nature. Because the problem that we're, as a society, as a civilization, we're struggling to cope with this environmental crisis. Why is it we don't care enough about the environment to do anything about it? Why is it that we seem to not recognise that we are totally embedded in that environment, and if that environment fails, then so do we? And exploring our disconnect with nature that seems to be at the heart of our inability to sort of step up to dealing with this crisis. So I pulled together some resources, and they were really looking at views of the universe, because you've probably, in your professional capacity, you are teaching RE. A lot of that is looking at ideas of God as a creator God. You've also got the Dawkins of this world as believing in a mechanistic view of the universe, that the universe is like a machine. And where I come from in my own sort of faith tradition is a slightly different view from those two views, which are often adversarially debated, and that is that the universe is not a machine. The universe is actually totally alive, and it's not been created by an external entity, as it were. So I was really coming at it from that perspective, and I thought I'd pull together some resources which were introducing those ideas, that idea really, and also looking at it in the context of our disconnect with nature. So, what were the resources that I came up with? There is a wonderful gentleman called Satish Kumar, and I don't know if you've come across it, but one of the resources we had, and you can view it online on YouTube, is a documentary, 1 hour documentary about his life, where he walks around Dartmoor and explains how connected he feels to that landscape. And he also shares some of his life experiences, because he grew up in India, and he actually went on a pilgrimage and walked thousands of miles for anti-nuclear back in the 60s. But he is what you would call a deep ecologist, and he has a very connected view of particularly in his landscape in Dartmoor. So I'm not being very eloquent about getting that across, but that was one of the key. So that was one resource I picked up. Another resource I picked up was, and in here I summarised some of the key points from that documentary, which actually conveys his views about the nature of the universe. He talks about God, nature is his God, for example. And The second resource was a film called Wasteland. Now, this is a film which it's in Portuguese, but well, I haven't really explained where this is coming from. This is what happens when you go. So I pulled these resources together in order to then share them with 4 secondary school teachers for them then to reflect on some of these materials and see to what extent they might be able to use them in the classroom, particularly in Key Stage 3, but also as a resource for secondary schools in more generally. And the thing about this particular film is that it shows the life of people who are actually living on the largest landfill site in the world, and you can start to see the waste that we are producing in the way we're living at the moment, and you can start to see the social justice issues there are in our society, in international society as well, when you consider the people who are actually living by picking off trying to recycle stuff at risk to their own health by picking stuff off of the landfill site. And it's a story about how it's a documentary about how an artist comes along and does artwork with them with a view to getting them to realise their own worth in a sense, so that it actually sort of starts to deal with the social justice side of things as well. So that's another resource. A third resource was a guy called Stephen Harding, and a book he's produced called Animate Earth, where he explores some of the ideas about how the problems with a mechanistic view. Oh God,
that's 7 minutes.
Yeah, problem with the mechanistic view of the universe. He's a scientist. There's another guy called. There's a couple of other resources in there. You can take these away, so you'll be able to look at them. So I don't need to go through them all in detail, but the final one I'll bring to your attention is, I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Rupert Sheldrake. He's another scientist, and he has recently published a book called The Science Delusion. Deliberately chose that title as a counterpoint to Dawkins' God Delusion that you may well have come across. And he then talks about, in that book, about how science has been hijacked by materialist philosophy. And he talks about how there are 9 assumptions that are part of that way of looking at the world, which are in fact contestable and could actually be experimentally explored using the scientific method. But science as a culture is not very receptive to looking at its own assumptions and ways of looking at the world. It treats them as fact rather than as faith principles, which is what they are. So putting those resources together, we had a couple of days where I sort of shared those resources, and then it was over to the teachers to think about them and see how they might do something with them in the classroom.